Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now, one of South Africa's iconic newspapers has turned 40. The Sowetan celebrated this milestone this past week, remembering their first edition in 1981. The paper was born at a difficult time for the media, with the paper coming soon after the banning of the Post Transvaal. The Post itself had barely survived 3 years before it too was banned by the apartheid authorities after it had replaced the World newspaper under the editorship of Percy Qoboza. The paper has been a mainstay in South African life for the 4 decades, with a long line of some of the country's best journalists, photographers and editors like Percy Qoboza and Agri Cluster. I spoke to the most recent editor of the paper, Nwabisa Makunga, and she shared her thoughts about the significance of this milestone and what the paper has stood for over time.
Is quite an iconic publication in South Africa and the South African media landscape. So we are fully mindful of what it means to turn 40, not only for us, but for our readers over the last 40 years, our audiences. And so it's quite an achievement, I think, to reach it, and it's very exciting for us.
So why was the paper set up? I mean, it came into being at a very difficult time in South Africa's history.
You remember, the Sowetan is basically a product of, we always say it's a product of the struggles of Black people. It came by, after the banning of newspapers, 2 newspapers in particular, back in the 70s, late 70s into early 80s. And it was really a group of journalists who decided, that their voice would not be silenced by what the apartheid regime had done. And so they got together and they started this publication. And I think that, one of the first publications they said, what they said they stood for was, it was activism to bring about fighting for equality for Black people. And so we're here today.
So what do you think those early pioneers were able to do in terms of contribution with this activism? What sort of work did they put out, and what effect do you think that it had?
First of all, I thought they were brave. I've been reading through some of the stories that were done, at that time, and throughout, and it was really stories that spoke to what people were needing. It was a platform of expression, for people who were persecuted in the land of their birth. And I think what they did, they were able to rally people behind a cause to say, this is what we stand for, and we will not be silenced. We will speak with our voices. We will expose the atrocities of the systems that rule us. And I think they really inspired generations in being able to do that.
And it started off as a local regional paper, but it had to go national, I guess. Did its voice change? Did it become more than just Soweto?
Absolutely. I think first, what I found interesting initially was the fact that, there was an entire debate about the name, for example, the name Sowetan, and people saying, they didn't want that name because it was associated with only a part of the country. But I think what we grew to understand is that being Sowetan is not necessarily, what a place is. It's really a state of mind. We know, obviously, from our development, in the country, people moved out of townships. Some people moved out of townships. Some people, stayed. However, I think the values that the paper carried, still are relevant today. And it's really a value of fighting for equality, fighting for a just system, one that serves, everybody equally.
You mentioned the bravery, and over the years, there have been some iconic people in journalism, both as reporters, writers, but also great cameramen that really, I suppose, made the brand that is the Sowetan.
Absolutely. I mean, on Tuesday, when we had our first stories, kind of looking back, we featured one of our colleagues, Mr. Velintlapo, who's a lensman. He's one of our longest, in fact, he is our longest serving team member. And the stories he told for me were quite amazing. And the people who he's met, the stories he's been able to capture, throughout the years. And of course, he's not the only one. And I think, one of the things that really made Sowetan something, an iconic paper was its presentation. So not just the storytelling, but its presentation of the stories that it was telling. And that was done by the brave, men and women who were working, who were writing and taking pictures of them.
All right. I mean, you are a much younger generation, and I just wonder, growing up, and certainly when you started to look towards journalism, how did you view the Sowetan? I mean, you probably didn't know at that stage that you would be editor one day, but what were your views?
You know what it is about Sowetan? I think it's for me personally, it's always been a paper that I was able to identify with. I obviously come from the Eastern Cape, and yes, it no longer at this moment, publishes in the Eastern Cape. However, I remember growing up in a home where my father, who was a factory worker, used to bring newspapers, and one of them was the Sowetan. So it was a paper that one was able to identify with, although I did not understand, I think at the time, particularly in the 90s or so, the significance of its voice. But it was something that, one you look at, and it was inspiring in terms of, one wanting to be a storyteller myself.
All right. So with such a big heritage, you then came in as the editor at a very different time in South Africa's history. How do you think the paper has been able to transition over time? Because during the struggle, as you said, it was about activism. Then democracy came and new conversations needed to happen. Do you think that the paper was able to transition? And I dare say that we are now in another era of post-democracy as well.
I think it did. Look, I think one thing we must all acknowledge is the fact that the media landscape has changed, dramatically. And there's a lot of pressure on journalists, on media companies, which really affects sometimes what we put out. However, I do think that, what makes it special is that the people the generations of people who've worked there have really been at the pulse of things, trying to understand, when something happens, when there are big developments happening in our country, what do they mean for in particular for Black people? What do they mean for people, in working class communities? And I think that's what we've really been able to, to do. And it's one of the things that for me, makes it still relevant today, that in keeping up with the evolution of South Africa, that we're still able to understand and, that this platform is to really document what such developments mean for ordinary people.
So when you talk to your staff and your reporters and you talk about the brand, the Sowetan, what do you tell them? Because one has to be clear, what is our vision? What is our raison d'etre? Why do we do what we do? What is that voice in 2021?
Consistently, we do what we do. We wake up every day, we go and tell the African story. We wake up every day, we give a platform for people who otherwise do not necessarily have one, to say, this is where you can express your voice authentically so. And we really raise that voice to be able to say, people must listen up and there must be change in the communities in which we serve. So it's quite a simple yet profound thing for us, in that we know exactly who we speak to, and we know, what those people are wanting to express in this platform. And it's really opening up that conversation. What is being Sowetan, but also what is being a product of a country that is developing.
And a country that is phenomenally young in terms of the average age. And they don't read newspapers. They're very online. Has that changed the way that the paper distributes, presents, but also writes because of the person that's on the other side reading the words?
It has, and it's really been a challenge because So on the one hand, there are people who read Sowetan, they've read it for many, many years, and obviously we cater to them in terms of print. But we also understand, that an overwhelming majority of our readers are now reading us on their screens, on their phones, and etc. And so sometimes the what they want to know, the immediacy of what they want to know, the language in which we must speak to them, has got to change. And I think those are the things that have changed. And one of the things that I always say to the team is that we must remember that the tools of delivering the message perhaps have changed, but the values remain the same. And the values must always remain the same, to be on the side of the people who read us and the people who want their voices to be heard.
Now more than ever before, I think journalists need to be trusted. Papers need to enjoy the trust of the people. And I guess this is something that you guard viciously and tenaciously, because these are difficult times. The State Capture Commission talks about newspapers receiving money and reporters perhaps brown envelopes, which has been around for years. But I guess this is something that you, with an iconic brand, are always mindful of.
Absolutely, Peter. I mean, a lot has happened, I think, in the media space, which has really meant that people no longer trust newspapers, or at least there is a trust deficit that has grown over the last few years. And I think our job, more than anything, is to try and regain that. And we regain that by not only speaking our voice, but actually understanding and listening to what people have to say. We've got to have integrity. And I think it's our currency. When we get things wrong, we must be quick to step up and own up and apologize and hold each other, and hold ourselves accountable. And I think that's how really you try and regain trust, and you build trust between us and our audiences. Without that trust, we are gone. We're not in business anymore. That's it. So for us, it's fundamental that in everything that we do, we've got to try and rebuild trust between us and readers.
All right. So you're the chief custodian at this time. What, when you look back, maybe in a few years' time, do you want your legacy to be in terms of this part of the paper's history? What's your vision going forward?
It's quite a tough one. So personally, what me being here means, I really hope to inspire a generation or a team, that dares to do things differently. That dares to say, we understand how things have been done. We live in a developing country, and the world is really moving, around us, where they place heart at the center of everything. I think a lot of what happens in newsrooms, there's a lot of toxicity, and it's very unfortunate. But I think if we are to be able to tell a South African story properly, we must know how it is to lead with heart and to lead with integrity. And I really hope, after I'm gone, at the Sowetan, we would have shaped a narrative that is authentic, that is authentically South African, that says, we speak to you with respect, we hold you accountable when we need to, and we open up a platform for you to have your voice heard.
All right, so congratulations to the Sowetan there. 40 years in print. Well, there's a paper that's 150 years old, and they've stopped the printing press. We'll find out why after the break. Welcome back. You're watching Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel. Grocott's Mail, South Africa's oldest independent newspaper, has stopped printing. Yep, the Makhanda-based newspaper has been unable to weather the financial storms that have been caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The paper will, however, remain available online. In May, the paper celebrated 150 years of publishing. And so, has a new era now come to pass? It seems so. For more, I'm now joined by board member and education editor at Grocott's Mail, Rod Amner. Rod, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good morning. Good to be here.
All right, so 150 years and then the printer stops printing. I suppose it's a sign of the times, eh?
Absolutely. I think it's been a long time coming. Grocott used to its own printing press, and that stopped running quite a while back, a decade ago. So it's been printed in Port Elizabeth, but since last year, there have been a couple of print editions that have been distributed in the community for free, up to 10,000 copies actually, and sponsored by civil society, the university, etc., to get COVID information out. But for the most part, we're online. There's a very big Facebook following. The website is popular, and GM Direct is sent to thousands of subscribers every week. So we're still out there digitally, but the print edition, sadly, is no longer coming out weekly. We used to come out twice a week. Back in the 19th century, daily. There were about 5 newspapers competing in Makhanda, well, then Grahamstown, in the 19th century. If you can believe that, 5 dailies simultaneously coming out every day. So things have changed, you could say.
All right. So how difficult was this decision? I mean, I guess it's a business in the end, but I suppose with a paper that's so old, you've got to try and find ways to keep it going, even if it costs money.
Yeah, absolutely. And, really the joy of being able to distribute a free newspaper into a community that is very challenged. It is a very poor community. Makhanda has a lot of challenges economically. It's a great joy to go into the community and just distribute the paper and to see the reaction of people in far-flung corners of the town or the city, if you like. 80,000 people. It's an appreciated institution, and people really like to get their hands on a physical copy. So there's no doubt that it's a tragedy in a way that it's no longer possible to do this. It hasn't been making money for a very long time. It's effectively been subsidized by Rhodes University and from other income streams for a number of years. And in fact, had it not been for that support, the paper, I think, would have died a long time before. I mean, just down the road in Bishu, King Williamstown, Kai Mercury stopped publishing, decades, well, a long time ago, in a much bigger town, the capital of the Eastern Cape. That paper was no longer viable. So I think Grocott did well to stay in print for 150 years. But I think the tide of history, and obviously COVID was the final nail in our coffin, you could say. So I think, very tough.
And it's now had quite a long association with the university, and so it was more than just a paper. It was really a great place to develop, grow and educate future journalists.
Yes, exactly. And it continues to do so, and to be a training vehicle for young journalists coming through the ranks. Our postgraduate diploma students work on the paper as general reporters. My third-year writing students act as education reporters for the paper. So, it continues to be a really important training institution. And I think it continues to be a really important source of independent information for the city. But I think it sees itself as well as being part of an ecology of information that is emerging in the city online. And that we play an important role in a burgeoning information ecology in this town. And I think, rather than seeing ourselves at the center of things, maybe that was the model in the old days, we're part of an ecology and we add value in that ecology. But there's a lot of information coming from a whole bunch of sources now, and there are many thousands of our citizens, despite the digital divide, who are online and very active in generating information. So I think the role has changed, and it's a much more participatory communication ecology now. And I think we continue to play a really important and valued role in that ecology, but we're maybe not even, we're not necessarily at the center of it. We're an important reference point, but we swim with that ecology and try and add value inside it.
So Rhodes University first got involved in 2003, set up this David Rabkin project for experiential journalism training. What's the story now? Because I believe you're partnering with GM Direct. What happens now? What's the plan going forward?
Well, GM Direct is effectively Grocott's Mail Online, the weekly publication. our students will continue to work on Grocott's mail, perhaps more so than ever. I think what has happened is that the newspaper has been embraced inside the School of Journalism. There is a Chinese wall between us and the university authorities, so it is guaranteed, the independence is guaranteed. But I think we're looking at more and more creative ways to integrate our teaching into the paper. So there are all sorts of editorial projects that are happening in parallel to the main product, which comes out every Friday, which will add value to the website. It will take us, more powerfully into the digital age. I think a lot more engaged journalism. So we'd be, teaching our journalists how to engage with audiences in a much more concerted way in co-developing stories before they're published, and developing new models for journalism. And we're thinking about, there are all sorts of reform movements in journalism happening around the world, constructive journalism in Europe, solutions journalism in the United States and other countries, engaged journalism. There's a lot of exciting, there are a lot of exciting developments in journalism, a lot of innovation, and we're hoping to follow those trends, develop our own models here. We have partnerships with Deutsche Welle and with some universities in the United States. So, I think the future looks actually very bright. There are new opportunities always when something dies, if you like, new opportunities arise. And I think we're very optimistic about, as I say, playing a positive role in a communicative ecology here in this small town. But we face a lot of challenges, but we have a lot of very powerful, active civic life. We're an incredibly important educational centre with a lot of educational innovation. There's a lot of very powerful and positive counter narratives to the doom and gloom, the potholes and the water and the dump site that's on fire. There's all sorts of, really negative stuff around local governance, sure, but there's also a great deal of positivity. This is an important city as an educational centre and in other ways as well. And I think we're looking to position ourselves educationally for our, for student journalists, but also as an innovative local media organization that is really trying to take some of the best practices from around the world and develop them here.
All right. I mean, we're talking local. It's been a community paper forever. However, going digital means that you now actually have potentially a much bigger audience. I mean, half the population at any given moment in time are students who eventually go to other parts of the world. And I'm sure now this is going to start to click, and because it was home for a very long time. So your footprint necessarily probably is going to grow much bigger now.
Well, it has done for a long time. There's a huge Makhanda diaspora around South Africa and the world. And in fact, a lot of the traffic comes from outside of the city. And I think that's true for most media publications now. There's a lot of interest in the city. There's a lot of affection for it. You spend 3 or 4 years here as a student, you don't lose your ties to this place. It somehow seeps into your soul. I think, the Eastern Cape has that kind of effect on a person. We definitely do have a global footprint. And I think some of our stories as well, are being picked up by ground up by the Maverick, by national publications, because what happens here is often of national import and significance and interest. I don't think we're in an isolated bubble at all. We're definitely part of a global media ecology as well.
So what do you write about? What goes on in Makhanda that keeps your paper busy?
Well, a lot. I mean, you might know that we've been in a drought, a really devastating one, for a very long time, 4 years. A little bit of rain this morning, but nothing big, nothing like what's happening up north in the country at the moment. Unfortunately, we could do with Eloise or something similar to sort ourselves out here. So water, and in fact, it's not just about the drought; it's about mismanagement of the water supply in this town, and that has been a massive issue. But I think local governance in general, the place doesn't look great. It is in a state of disrepair. But there is a lot of fight back. So there's a lot of civic fight back in this community. A lot of civic organizations are doing amazing work. And there's a lot of alliance building happening as well. So there's the Makhanda Circle of Unity. The Unemployed People's Movement have been partnering with, the Grahamstown Residents Association, still hasn't changed its name, but, it bridges across some of the economic and racial divides of this city. Those things are happening, and those are things worth reporting on. And yeah, I think, as I said before, there is a very powerful counter-narrative of innovation here. We have a matric school, for example, which is an extraordinary institution, a second chance school which bridges hundreds of learners every year from underperforming matric certificates to university entrances. So, the biggest feeder school for Rhodes University now is the Gadara Matric School. That's an innovative institution that, in my opinion, needs to be replicated across the country. It's an incredible model. It's a superb institution. And there are many other examples. There are, literacy organizations here organizing hundreds of parents into home literacy programs, etc. I'm speaking as an education editor, but, for me, this is actually one of the most innovative towns from an educational perspective. And I think, building a narrative around that, a raison d'etre, if you like, for the city, where we all sort of know what it is we're doing, what we're trying to achieve, where we're trying to go, and how we're trying to turn around our situation, but also build on the assets that we've developed over a couple of centuries in the city.
All right. And how are the students taking this? I mean, they must be excited. They're pretty digitally savvy anyway. And also what digital does, it gives you the opportunity to add new elements like video, I guess.
Absolutely. We have a cohort of, sort of 60, 70 students coming into our senior year, our fourth year. Most of them are multimedia students. Old silos between, sort of writing and photography and video and so on are breaking down. So our students are becoming digitally savvy. They're skilled in a wide variety of different mediums. And I think there is a lot of, as I say, exciting possibility here. I think one of the things that, it's one thing to train students who are here for 4 or 5 years who then move off into other parts of the country. But, what we also need to be doing, I think, is building digital literacy inside the city itself. It's I think, really important that young people and some of those parents I mentioned, just citizens in general are in a position to generate their own citizen journalism and contribute and participate in that media ecology. And so we do have outreach programs where we train local young people in media skills, digital storytelling, etc., and trying to bring people into the communicative ecology more. And I think that's just as important, if not more important, is that we at some point in this country need to teach digital literacy at school level. We have huge digital divide though still. So schools are very poorly equipped. We're talking robotics and all these fancy things, but kids just don't have basic access to technology. The libraries in the Eastern Cape, 220 libraries, haven't had internet for 3 years. This is crazy. So these things have to change to allow our citizens access to the digital space and to collaborate with the likes of our students, learning those digital skills in producing information that is genuinely representative and brings people into the conversation and accesses, perspectives and information from everywhere.
Rod Amner, it's been great talking to you, and we wish you the very best in the next part of this iconic newspaper's history, and may it live long. Thanks so much indeed for sharing your time with us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right, that's Rod Amner, who's a board member and education editor at Grocott's Mail. 150 years it's been in print, and sadly had to shut the printing press, but it is going through a new era as an online publication. Right, we're going to have more for you after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Media Monitor. Now, Egyptian authorities released Al Jazeera journalist Mahmoud Hussein after more than 4 years in detention on accusations of publishing false news a security source said on Friday. Hussein, an Egyptian national held under preventative detention since December 2016, was finally released from jail on Thursday night, the source said, without giving further details. Al Jazeera, which has run a daily campaign for his liberation, did not immediately confirm his release, but had repeatedly said that he was being held without formal charges, a trial or a conviction. On Thursday, the Constitutional Court of South Africa upheld a 2019 High Court ruling that invalidated legislation allowing for the surveillance of members of the press. The court ruled Regulation of Interception of Communications and Provision of Communication-Related Information Act 70 of 2002 law unconstitutional. And that was following a legal challenge by the Amabungane, South African-based investigative journalism organization, and Sam Sol, who's an investigative journalist and managing partner of that outlet. All right, so that's a look at some of the stories that we're always trying to keep in mind's eye, particularly the plight of journalists across the continent, because it's so hard being a journalist at times, and we just want to make sure that their stories do not go untold. Right, it's time now for us to go into our news archives, and today we take you back to the 3rd of February 1996, when Bafana Bafana won at the African Cup of Nations here at home. It was such an amazing time. I got so excited, and this is how the SABC covered the trophy parade after that successful tournament.
Thousands of people in Johannesburg and Soweto today celebrated Bafana Bafana's victory in the African Cup of Nations tournament last weekend. The ticker-tape parade brought traffic and everything else to a halt for a few hours as fans paid tribute to South Africa's latest sporting heroes.
It was soon clear that it wasn't going to be an ordinary bus ride. The reception the team received in Soweto was a sign of things to come. People abandoned homes, businesses and schools just to get a glimpse of those who brought so much joy and pleasure to them. Fans in this city, however, had reason to feel cheated. The bus sped through and many people missed out on seeing their heroes. Back in Johannesburg, the same scenes were repeated over and over, just on a much bigger scale. Not even the absence of Shoes, Tinkler, Masinga and Khadebe, who had already gone abroad, could take anything away from the occasion.
I couldn't believe that so many people would turn out to pour out their emotions in celebrating of this great victory.
It's great to see that the people are appreciating what we've done, but this turnout is phenomenal. It's good. These are the people that really matter. These are the people that we played for. These are the people that we went out, we won the cup for them, and now they're coming to show their appreciation for us. So it's great.
I never knew the people would respond like this, and it's frightening to think that we can never let them down again. See, the pressure, if you thought it was bad before the tournament, I'm sure every player's got to remember this. They've got to want this every time they play.
But all good things come to an end on a day which will be remembered by players and fans for a long, long time to come. David van der Sant, TV News, Johannesburg.
Oh, very exciting times indeed, and everybody was so young, even me. My goodness, I remember that time very well indeed, and we haven't won it since. Let's hope that this will happen in my lifetime still. Okay, let's take a look at our local papers here in South Africa, and we're joined now by Gao Palaitzile, who's the senior reporter at Jacaranda FM. Gao, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you. I hope this new year has started well for you.
Hi, Peter. Thank you so much for having me. Well, 2021 feels worse than 2020, but with this vaccine, we're hoping things will change. It's good to be here too.
Fantastic. All right, so you've had a look at some of the papers. Which one grabbed your attention firstly?
Obviously, the that's on the City Press and the Sunday World. We all know that on Friday we didn't get much information about what happened in that meeting between EFF leader Julius Malema and the former president Jacob Zuma. But the City Press and the Sunday World have some sources, and they have quite a, I can call it, when I was reading it, it felt like I'm reading a movie. But basically, according to the City Press and the sources they spoke to, this meeting is actually a very big political move. We all obviously expected EFF leader Julius Malema to persuade the former president to abide by the Constitutional Court ruling. However, according to the newspapers, there are two missions of these meetings, and the first one is to ask him to actually go to the Zondo Commission, but to show and prove that the Chief Justice Raymond Zondo is actually biased. Remember, Zuma's not the only one that the commission is looking into, despite the fact that he has been implicated by over 30 people. They are also looking into Malema and others. So according to the newspapers, Malema has a vested interest in Zuma appearing there and showing that the Deputy Chief Justice is actually biased. But what the newspaper also says, the City Press says, this is also a very big political move to discredit President Cyril Ramaphosa and to weaken him. Apparently, I also read in the Sunday Independent, this meeting was not as spontaneous as we all thought with the tweets. Apparently, it's been planned for a while with Mzwandile Masina and other Zuma loyalists in the ANC. And apparently, this is to weaken Ramaphosa. Remember, recently we had a testimony by former Eskom CEO, Brian Molefe, who implicated the president in state capture. So apparently in this meeting, it was discussed that Zuma needs to show that Ramaphosa is also implicated. And it further goes on to say that people are aligning in politics to weaken Ramaphosa. Sorry about that. No. I have a little one at the door. To weaken Ramaphosa, he's knocking. To weaken Ramaphosa, apparently there's going to be a motion of no confidence against Ramaphosa because of his inaction in government and specifically the failure to act against corrupt individual. We all know PPE corruption. So apparently the strategy is to show that Ramaphosa has been a weak president. He came here saying he's here to get rid of corrupt individual, but he hasn't acted. So this meeting, this tea had a lot.
Okay, but again, it raises all sorts of questions. And for me, the first one is Malema and Zuma in the same room over tea. Just 5 minutes ago, he was saying, that one, he must come to the commission and explain himself. And he really worked hard to get President Zuma removed from office. It's quite a thing to see this. I mean, I was shocked when I saw it. So perhaps that's one question we need to understand. I suppose in politics, friendships and enemyships are fleeting things.
I mean, it was Malema himself who said it, Peter, that in politics there are no enemies, right? So everything in politics is a chess move, right? It's all about aligning for a common purpose. So it appears right now Zuma and Malema might just have a similar enemy. This is just me speculating.
Yes.
But this could be a good move to get rid of the current sitting president because the EFF itself, it hasn't been supporting this current president. They've been calling him out on a lot of matters. So I wasn't particularly shocked, but we all know how politics works. So it will be great to see what's going to happen going forward.
The other side of this, of course, is the Zondo Commission is looking at allegations of state capture. How is going after President Ramaphosa going to help with that issue? That's not going to go away. The president, former president, still has been implicated by a number of witnesses. So bringing down President Ramaphosa is not going to change that. So one again doesn't understand if these two are connected or this is just something, another battle that's going to play out.
Yeah, because remember, Peter, for me personally, as a journalist who's been covering the Zondo Commission, there's been many times where I've observed and seen how the commission itself is used to fight political battles. I think one of the most bizarre testimony that I've ever heard at the commission was when the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, was testifying, and he was being cross-examined by Advocate Dalimpofu, who's also in the EFF and who was also at this meeting on Friday. I mean, for me, I've listened to the commission, I've followed the commission, but that cross-examination and that testimony and how they were going back and forth felt like a political debate, like they needed a ring to just go do it there. It felt like this should have not been at the commission. It wasn't factual, it was opinions. They were saying very like ugly things to each other, that did petty things that didn't make sense. It felt a bit, I hate using the word, but it was quite childish.
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like the Zondo Commission at times gets used to fight political battles. I mean, in politics, it's a rough game, so I guess you use what you gotta use.
Yeah. And look, just to close off, you might not have seen the Sunday Tribune, but they're leading with a story saying that the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal wants to meet former President Jacob Zuma this week to understand the basis of his meeting with EFF leader Julius Malema. So their diehard supporters, the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, wondering, how is it that you're having this meeting? Why are you having this meeting? So again, explanations that he's going to have to provide.
No, exactly. And we're going to be seeing a lot of meetings, because what we would have expected is for the top six to meet with Zuma, not Malema. We would have expected them to take the first action when this happened. But there's going to be a lot of meetings that we're going to be seeing going forward after this, because a lot of eyebrows are being raised about what the hell is going on.
Sunday Times, interesting headline, and it's about security with vaccines. And it's sad that, we live in a country that we even have to think about this, because one would think that this is for the greater good, saving lives. But for sure, it's a commodity that's probably worth more than its weight in gold.
Yes, Peter, I think this story is quite important, and I think a lot of South Africans must not ignore it, because the safety of the vaccines will decide what happens to us in terms of COVID-19 and how we deal with what is called third wave that's also coming, because I'm not really sure what that means. But basically, the Sunday Times is talking about how government and law enforcement agencies are doing their best to ensure that the transportation of these vaccines is safe, because apparently this vaccine will sell for way more in the black market. We all know there are people who are looking for this vaccine who are not in the list of people who are supposed to be getting it first. So it is paramount that this vaccine is kept safe. One of the companies that will be making sure that this happens is BioVac. So they are saying in the Sunday Times that they are confident that the vaccine will be transported safely. One of the things that happened this week in Parliament is the Gauteng Department of Health did brief Parliament as well about how the rollout is going to happen. We do understand that the first vaccine is expected to be administered this Wednesday. So they said that they are concerned about the safety of where this vaccine will be kept, because if this vaccine is lost or stolen, there's quite a lot of problems for this country, because without the vaccine, every single dose counts. So we can't have a situation where the vaccine is stolen. I don't know if you remember back when we were still testing, there was a story once where tests were found just lying around in the Eastern Cape. I mean, we don't want a situation like that with the vaccine. So it's quite important that all eyes are on government now, because it all depends on this vaccine being transported safely to provinces and making sure that it's not lost or stolen.
All right, Gal, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much indeed. Always a pleasure talking to you. Take care. All right, and that's where we come to the end of the program. Thanks so much indeed for joining us for this week's edition of Media Monitor. Join us again at the same time next week. In the meantime, please take care of each other. Bye-bye, everyone.